All right, joining me is none other than Sarah Rumpf, former writer for Red State and currently writing for Mediaite. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you very much. I have to apologize because I've twice delayed when we were trying to start this call because I've gotten phone calls about this story I'm working on. So it's been a little chaotic.
Nice. Yeah, no, so I can't say what's going on, but I personally am looking forward to reading about this particular story.
Yeah, it should be pretty good. One of the things that has really frustrated me is that the governor, no one from his office called Orange or Osceola County. Nobody from his office called Disney. Nobody called Reedy Creek. I spoke directly with somebody at Reedy Creek within this week, and they've confirmed that nobody reached out to them before this bill went through. Nobody from the governor's office, nobody from the bill sponsors, nobody at all. And now they have talked to a couple of the Democratic legislators that have reached out to them. And again, like the governor wants to turn this into a culture war, and that if you're not on board with this bill, then it's because you're a liberal or, supporting woke corporations or everything. Forget the partisan politics. This is a crappy way to run a government.
Yep.
They passed a 1.5-page bill that's going to devastate the Central Florida economy and cause like chaotic, catastrophic headaches for Orange and Osceola County. And none of them did any work on it. And an awful lot of the reporters around the country that are writing on this don't seem to have the ability to talk to anybody. And I know I'm a local kid, and I know some people who know some people who know some people who know some people, but I work alone. I mean, Queso the cat is here, but he's not helpful. I have no staff. I should not be scooping the New York Times and the Orlando Sentinel and the Wall Street Journal on this stuff. I shouldn't be the only one that could get a sitting county commissioner on the record to say that this is a bad idea. But somehow I was. I'm still kind of flabbergasted by that. I picked up the phone and was like, "Hey, how you doing?"
Yeah.
And people talked. It wasn't any kind of complicated trickery. It was just, "Hi, I have a question." "Oh, okay." There's no magic, no special skills. It's just punch numbers on the phone.
Yeah, no, my reporting experience was just consistent during my senior year in high school of just going to high school plays and writing reviews for them, and one of them actually got published. That's my journalism experience.
Well, podcasting is journalism, so it's just a different type, chatting instead of typing.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I can say sort of what's going on, because this is probably going to be uploaded a little bit after this article gets published. But basically what we've been talking about is the state of Florida just last week passed a bill to strip Walt Disney, which had sort of a special governing status in the Orlando area, of that status, essentially passing on the costs of building roads and maintaining infrastructure onto the residents of the two counties in that area, probably resulting in a average tax hike of the residents of the area about $2,200. You wrote an article.
Wait. It's way more complicated and way worse than that.
Okay.
Okay. Let me give you like a Cliff Notes version of what this thing is. It's a special taxing district. The key word is taxing. Florida law does not let the government tax taxpayers within a county differently than other taxpayers. That's discrimination. Cannot do it. Unless a group of those taxpayers agree to a special taxing district, essentially saying, we have a special need here, or this is a special use that requires a different type of infrastructure, and so we are willing to do something differently. For your listeners that are familiar with how their property taxes are calculated, every county has a millage rate, and that is a percentage of your home's assessed value, and that's what you pay in property taxes. So if the millage rate is X and your home is worth Y dollars, then X times Y equals your property taxes Z. Okay, and that's the end of the math I'm going to do. But Reedy Creek, the Reedy Creek Improvement District was established in the 1960s when Walt Disney was going to be building this massive entertainment complex in Central Florida. They had Disneyland already in Anaheim, California, and that was successful, but it was in a already developed area. That meant that they had very limited ability to expand. That meant that they had conflicting uses. I think there was some discussion that they didn't like some of the bars and stuff that were in the neighborhood, that it wasn't the family friendly, squeaky image they wanted the parks to be. And he also, and you can understand how, this is something that would really bother the corporate people. Everyone else was getting the hotel money in California. So what they wanted to do in Florida was have room to expand, have their own hotels, and have an ability to have a buffer. At the time that they came, this area of Central Florida was the Turnpike and I-4, and the Orlando Airport was there, but there wasn't a lot else in this part of Central Florida. It was swamps and a couple cows wandering around. So the issue is they want to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars here, but it's also going to require a lot of infrastructure. And both of the counties looked at it and were basically like, well, this sounds like it's going to be a big economic benefit, but we don't have anywhere near the staff or resources to devote to this. There's no way we can handle it. We just don't have the capacity. At the time, like most of the parcels were miles away from existing water and electric. And so this is not something that was only done for Disney. The Reedy Creek Improvement District is unique in a number of aspects, partly because of the size of the parcel. It was originally about 27,000 acres. It's now about 25,000 because the City of Celebration was de-annexed in the 90s. But it's a very big parcel that's the current size is nearly 40 square miles. And what they've got is basically a structure that Disney still pays property taxes to Orange and Osceola County. This is not a tax break. They actually pay the highest taxes out of the entire state. Or the Reedy Creek millage rate is the highest in the entire state. It's higher than even Miami. So they pay the property taxes to Orange and Osceola County. They also collect sales taxes like every other business in the state and remit those to the state government in Tallahassee. And that includes a small portion that's the county. Our state sales taxes here, I think here in where I am, it's like 7.5 cents, and like 1.5 cents of that is the county's part. I'd have to look that up. It's been a while since I refreshed myself on that, but that's roughly how it works. There's also a tourist development tax that is charged for every hotel room night stay in the state. So Disney is collecting all of those on all of their hotel stays and then remitting that to the government as well. And then on top of all of that is where Reedy Creek comes in. They levy tax. They are a separate entity that is set up to be like a government. They assess the Disney properties that are within the district and levy taxes directly on them to cover the costs of all of their operations. And so this includes things like road construction and maintenance. They have a power plant. Just a quick note on that. There's been a lot, Disney can build a nuclear plant. Theoretically, the original charter did include a grant that they had the power to build a nuclear power plant. No one needs to worry about Mickey doing that, even if they get bought out by crazy people, because the federal government does have superior authority and you cannot build a power plant without Washington, D.C.'s approval. So don't worry, Mickey's not going nuclear. Anyway, they are responsible for building permitting. They are responsible for, they have water and sewer treatment, landscaping that they're doing. Some of that is done by direct employees, and then there's a lot of stuff that's done with outside contractors. They have a fire department that they run. They have emergency medical services. And again, these are all things that Disney is, a regular business that's just out in the county or within the city of Orlando pays their property taxes. And if they catch on fire, the fire department will come. Disney's paying property taxes to the county, and then they're also taxing themselves again through Reedy Creek to pay for some of this stuff. If you get hurt at one of the Disney parks and you need emergency medical care, the Reedy Creek first responders will provide that medical care to you, give you an ambulance ride to the local hospital, and you will not be charged for that. Once you show up at the hospital, they will bill you in all the crappy ways that our current medical system has to bill you. But you're not going to get billed if you fall down and scrape your knee at Disney, or God forbid that you need an ambulance trip somewhere. And anybody who has taken an ambulance ride in this country within the past decade knows that is not a small bill. So, but again, that is the way that the Reedy Creek is structured. And I've been researching this more and more over the past couple days since this insane thing happened last week. And over, I'm seeing a story where Reedy Creek has been set up where Disney is getting taxed extra and paying a lot, but because they want they want the top level. That awful story on that attraction on iDrive where the high school boy fell out and died. We know now that the ride was adjusted to allow a bigger gap than it had when it was inspected. We know that there are some other safety things that seem to have been skipped. And there's like training issues. Now, some of that is park operations, but some of that is also an infrastructure kind of thing. Disney doesn't want anybody to die at the parks because it just isn't, that's not good business. Like, and this is one of those cases where the capitalist selfish motivation is a good thing. It's bad for their bottom line if a ride is unsafe, if a guest doesn't have, if a tourist doesn't have a good experience, if they see peeling paint. So you look at the building codes that they've enacted, they're actually called the Epcot codes. They are in every aspect comparable or more stringent than the Florida building code. So you're talking about things like if there's an emergency and the lights go out, the backup generators and those systems are tested at Disney far more than they are required in any other system in the state. You think about people that are emergency planners and people that are builders and architects and are trying to do all these things. If there's a fire in the building, how do we get everybody out? How big is this hallway? How big is that doorway? How easy is that door to open? Where are the stairwells? How are they lit? How many people can get through from point A to point B to get out the door if there's an emergency? And in some of these aspects, there's issues where the Epcot code requirements are, again, safer, I think it's fair to say, than the Florida building codes require. So it's a lot of stuff like that. This is what my state government signed a bill to dissolve into thin air. If you are a Marvel fan, a Thanos Snap, if you will, on June 1st, 2023. This all legally ceases to exist, except.
And just before you continue, right as you were saying that, my computer actually just activated night mode, so it looks a lot redder. So when you're saying this on my end, so.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I have magic powers. That would be neat.
Yes.
Yeah. I hope nobody actually died when I snapped my fingers. That is not my intention.
But it ended.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so that's what they're doing. So if Reedy Creek ceases to exist, that $2,000 to $3,000 extra tax bill per family of four that you've been seeing banted about, it comes from the Orange County tax collector, Scott Randolph. That is only dealing with one aspect of Reedy Creek. They currently have a roughly $2 billion bond. This is a very common thing that local governments do. It is a affordable way for them to finance construction and developments and infrastructure. Your city and county have bonds right now, I'm almost certain, wherever you are, throughout Canada and America. And they have one. The bond rating the bond rater, I have to look at the details, but they just kind of downgraded Reedy Creek a little bit because of all this chaos. But if Reedy Creek is dissolved, then the special taxing district dissolves. And so then those assets and liabilities go to the county. And because there's no special taxing district, the counties would be unable to continue to have that debt service only paid by the taxpayers within the Reedy Creek Improvement District. That debt service would have to be paid by the taxpayers of the entire county. That's where that figure comes in. Oh, but wait, that's not the only crappy thing this bill does. There's everything the government does. There's costs. if you filed a new ordinance that said that your county had to keep a paper copy of every email, that's dumb, but that would be an expense. Okay. Like that, you could picture that, like, okay, well, that, I mean, it's not a lot, like one piece of paper, like it'd be dumb, but it would be an expense. So what we have here is even if Orange and Osceola County want to completely copy what Reedy Creek is and just say, okay, well, we agree to the same thing. Don't change a thing. Don't mess this up, which is what they'd like the statute to just stay. But they can't copy and paste the state statute because that legal structure doesn't exist in the same way at the county level. There are other things they can do. There's something called a municipal services taxing unit, MSTU. But it's not exactly the same. And that also cannot include incorporated cities. And you know what's within the Reedy Creek Improvement District? 2 cities called Bay Lake and Lake Buena Vista. Guess where all the really valuable crap is? All the parks.
In those
within the
cities.
city. They're almost totally within those city limits. So again, an MSTU would solve part of the problem for part of the land, but they cannot dissolve the city. There's other problems in that the cities, again, have to do due diligence on this. That requires lawyers. That requires urban planners. Their staffs are already overburdened and overworked. They're dealing with a mess of construction on I-4. It's terrible. I live here, I can attest. There's an affordable housing crisis. Rent and mortgages have skyrocketed all over the place, especially in this area. It is tough. It is tough. I know people that have had to move out of the area because they just could not afford, they couldn't afford, to live here. You know, you don't want to have to try to rent a 1-bedroom apartment with a family. People have had to move. If even just starting to look at this, just starting to study it is an expensive 6-figure, soon to be 7-figure expense. This is complicated. I used to work for a firm that did some local government law. I know a lot of local government attorneys. One I spoke to last week said that an agreement between 2 adjacent counties just to do a water agreement. I don't know the details if it's one where like there's water in one that they're selling to the next county, or they're both drawing, or like just, sharing a lake, maybe, I don't know, something like that, but just some agreement dealing with water. It was roughly a year to do a study, to meet their due diligence requirements, to negotiate the agreement, and to execute it. Just on water for 2 counties. A 25,000 acre parcel with the state's largest employer, millions and millions of people that come in and out every year, environmental issues, safety issues, road issues, building issues. This is not a project that can be done in a year. It is not possible. Not possible to be done right anyway. And the longer this goes on without being repealed, the counties will have to start studying how to fix this. They will have to. So it's going to start costing the counties hundreds of thousands and soon millions of dollars. And their budgets are already strapped. So then they have the choices of cutting services somewhere or raising taxes. So when Scott Randolph, our tax collector, says that our taxes will go up between $2,000 and $3,000 per family, that's the floor. That's the minimum pain this will cause. And then it gets more fun. The Reedy Creek Improvement District cannot hire anybody if they don't exist. According to that bill now, June 1st, 2023, they cease to exist. That means there are roughly 400 direct employees don't have a job. They have another roughly 400 employees that are hired under an entity that's their utility company, basically. And then they have another, they have about 2,000 contracts with outside vendors. And that means companies. So each one of those companies has multiple employees. And they tend to work with Disney long term, and so they've learned the expectations. There's a reason you never see a pothole at Disney, because they have people that are working on the roads all the time. If anything is remotely not perfect, they've got it. The teams and teams of people that they've got landscaping everything. These are, when you add it all up, it is, and I said this on a radio show last week, it's potentially tens of million, hang on, it's been a long day. Tens of thousands of blue collar, middle class, and first responder jobs in Central Florida that the governor signed to eliminate on June 1st, 2023. They can't have the job if they don't exist. And the county can just hire them. And again, it does not work that way. Reedy Creek pays more. They have better benefits. They have their own uniforms. I mean, I that's a small thing, but like, across the board, there's just a lot of different things. It is not an equivalent job. The counties, neither Orange nor Osceola, can afford to come and hire the firefighters. They're paid more for Reedy Creek. And they've got, and the way I think I phrased it in the article is that they'd be faced with three awful choices: be unable to properly staff and be understaffed and all the problems that causes, break their budget to try to raise their whole county pay up to the level of Reedy Creek, which would be catastrophic for the budget, or try to pay the Reedy Creek people more, and then they will immediately get sued by the public employee unions for the pay disparity. Like, you can't expect the Orange County firefighters to sit there and see the guys down and the firefighters down in Reedy Creek getting paid more and be okay with that. They'll sue, which makes sense. So it's a mess across the board. And again, the governor doesn't seem to have any sort of plan for this. They've been putting out statements the last few days saying they're going to fix it. How? Because all the plans to say, oh, we'll fix the tax issue, nobody will pay more in taxes. Okay, well, the only way to do that is by writing a bill that actually has some knowledge and research behind it. The election is in a minute and a half. Our primary is in August, the general election's in November. Are you going to have another special session? You have no time to study this. You haven't put anything together. They don't have any time to fix it. What they're basically saying is, well, re-elect us, and we promise we'll fix it in the 2023 general session. I don't trust the people that would vote for such a poorly done bill. I'm having trouble articulating how furious I am about this, and I've resisted naming people other than the governor and the sponsors of the bill. I'm trying very hard to keep my powder dry, but I'll tell you this. I've lived in the state my entire life. I have long-standing relationships with a number of political people and elected officials, and some of the names that I saw with a Y next to their name broke my heart, because they know better. They know better. They know this is a bad deal. They know this is a First Amendment violation. They know this is going to be bad. It's a temper tantrum for DeSantis's presidential campaign, and it's just a really, really bad way to govern. And I am profoundly disappointed and heartbroken by everybody that voted for it.
I'm considering uploading just all that in a separate video right there. And to think that's the Cliff's Notes version.
I mean, it's a complicated issue. So, and that's been part of my frustration, because it's easy to say, oh, well, Disney did this bad thing, so they should be punished. So let's break that down. Let's break that down. Disney's not perfect. Their stance on China alone is abhorrent. They should be criticized loudly.
Yeah.
Okay. People have different opinions about the parental rights and education bill.
Let's talk about that now. But yeah, well, let's go on.
But let's just focus on the Disney thing for just a second, if you'll humor me.
Sure.
What Disney did was, oh, they're talking about the bill. They're debating the bill. Oh, they passed it. Okay. And then they sent out a press release that said they didn't like it and would do everything in their power or everything they could to repeal it. Okay, so this got DeSantis and everybody all mad, but what are they actually going to do? Because like, I saw that and I laughed and I was like, oh, that's garbage. That's BS. Because they don't really have anything to do. They aren't elected officials. And there were already enough of the big prominent LGBT and liberal groups that had donated to a legal fund. Like a lawsuit was filed almost immediately on this. Disney may have donated to that legal fund, but they didn't need the money. They had the lawyers, they had the plan together. Like they already had this. Disney isn't like, whether that lawsuit wins or loses or whatever, like they're not the judges. That they don't, their money's not needed. It doesn't matter. Now here's the thing. They also cut off their political contributions in the whole state. That's what they're really mad about. It's not that they sent out a press release. It's not that they're worried that Disney's subverting democracy. They're mad that the money train got cut off. And again, you can have strong opinions about Disney. And that's the thing, like a lot of the people that have been most vocal criticizing the repeal of Reedy Creek are people who are also some of the most vocal critics of Disney. My state rep here, Anna Escamani, is a Democrat, and she is very vocal about criticizing Disney. She won't go to the parks, like she won't go there. And she's called out, like the sponsor of the bill, Randy Fine, has gotten about, I think, $20,000 in donations from Disney. And she's like, are you going to give that back? And he's not. Even if you are the most anti-Disney person, this is not the way to solve the problem. What this is going to do, it's not going to crush Disney. The parks are a small and diminishing percentage of their revenue, and this is one park, one of 6. You got California, Paris, China, Tokyo. This isn't going to crush Disney. It may make them pause doing additional development in Florida. Would you build another park here right now with these people in charge?
Would you continue operating the current ones?
Well, Space Mountain's not that easy to pack up. I don't think they're going to shut down operations in the state. What I think is possible, they were in the process of moving 2,000 employees from California to a new facility they're preparing to build just outside Orlando. Maybe they don't do that. 2,000 jobs. And again, these are not minimum wage jobs. It's not going to crush Disney. If Reedy Creek completely dissolves and for whatever reason the counties aren't able to work something out, it's not going to crush Disney. They do a lot of the same work with the city of Anaheim building department and dealing with the city of Anaheim fire department and dealing with the city of Anaheim water and sewer. And hey, Disneyland still functions and they still make a pile of money there. They'll figure it out. What this is going to do is completely dehabilitate Orange and Osceola County local government from functioning. And we have real needs here. It's going to devastate the Central Florida economy. It's going to have ripple effects statewide. We have no state income tax because we have a sales tax and we have the tourist development tax. And we have all these people who don't live here who show up and stay in hotels and eat at the restaurants and buy trinkets and buy souvenirs and just spend money here. And then they leave. And we have all that tax money that they spent while they were here. That's what keeps us from having a state income tax. Any reduction in Disney's operations, if this slows their roll for a little bit, that's not going to crush them, but it could crush us. And again, like I'm still kind of like my brain is trying to like, did they actually do this? Like, are they really trying to burn down the Central Florida economy? Like, what? How is that even remotely responsible? Like, even to make the threat. I mean, this is like, you know, if a teacher has a kid who's talking in class and they threaten to shoot them in the head, like that's not an appropriate response. That's insane. Like, you know, the kids shouldn't be talking in class. We all agree on that. Okay, your response is insane. You know, nobody's actually going to die here, but a lot of people around here could be homeless. A lot of people could lose their jobs. And well, the governor's spokespeople have been tweeting that they've got it all figured out. So color me skeptical.
Yeah, just to give the one sentence summary of basically everything you just said, DeSantis basically decided, I'm going to wreck the Central Florida economy to own the libs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's thinking about language and how we say things. I would like to point out, no one has ever actually owned a lib. You do not get a pet liberal when you write a mean tweet. You don't get to keep one. You get applause from your team for a nanosecond until the online attention span moves on to the next thing. But again, like, it's all about how we've got rhetoric over policy. I have never in my life heard a Florida elected official refer to Disney as a California corporation, but they've been saying that this past month. A California corporation, woke California corporation, Burbank politics. It's just, the whole thing just doesn't even make sense. Like, it's, again, Disney's not perfect. There's issues that come along with development and growth like that. But this idea of demonizing them and making it, I mean, it sounds like they're talking about a Disney villain, the California corporation. It's just all very weird. It's all very weird.
Yeah, for sure. And I just, what stood out to me in the events of this particular past week was DeSantis basically got called a socialist by the Democratic governor of Colorado, who basically urged Disney to relocate to Denver.
Yeah, now I don't think that's happening. There's advantages to our weather. I'm sitting on my back porch right now with the windows open. But again, here's the thing, like, this isn't just an insane thing to do to Disney. He's gone on a war path there. And I reported on this too. Late last year, he went to a Chamber of Commerce thing and told them that if they stick their necks out too far, then he's going to look under their hoods.
Yep.
That the chamber is irrelevant and he doesn't care what they think. And the message is really clear. If you criticize this governor, then they may do something to retaliate. They may wipe out a major function of your business. I mean, think about it on a smaller scale. If you've got a business that you're operating and you write some Facebook post criticizing DeSantis, and then all of a sudden they decide to put a highway right through where your business is, put a highway through your home, or rezone your property, don't approve your business license next year. I mean, the level of insanity that this seems to be entailing, I don't think they're going to waste the time to try to go after an individual restaurant and Tavares or anything. But this is an insane message. You're trying to attract businesses to this state, and you've just said that you're willing to do something insane against the state's largest employer. If you're an out-of-state company looking to relocate, are you going to come to Florida? I don't think so right now. I mean, it's just an absolutely wild message to send.
Yeah, and
this is like predictability. Even if there's higher taxes, but it's predictable, you see people make that trade-off all the time. Okay, well, the taxes are higher here, but it's a really safe city and the schools are really great. And so I'm happy to pay higher property taxes to live within the city limits here because this all evens out and it's fine. You wouldn't expect to move somewhere like that and then have them slash the property taxes and destroy your school's budget and stop maintaining the roads. People like predictability. This is a very insane thing to have done.
Yeah. And it kind of leads me to another question that I guess I wanted to ask, which is, DeSantis sort of posturing, particularly that comment he made at the Chamber of Commerce, warning businesses, not to stick, not to put their nose in a place where it doesn't belong, that sort of cold gangster talk. But it kind of just makes me wonder if this is sort of the direction that kind of the GOP is sort of heading into, sort of this anti-corporation, type of stuff. And in fact, you see some of this kind of happening in Hungary as well. In fact, Christina Pasha on Twitter kind of signaled, her support, for as well the support of Team DeSantis for that sort of Viktor Orban style of politics and that brand of illiberal democracy. I'm kind of wondering, is that kind of the direction that our party might be headed in?
It scares me, but I think so. And the hire of Christina Pushaw is something that should give everybody pause about Ron DeSantis's judgment. What she does would be wildly inappropriate for a campaign staffer. It is completely inappropriate for a state taxpayer paid position.
Yep.
I am paying her salary so that she can harass people online. And she runs everything out of her personal Twitter account. She doesn't have an official one, and she's on there all hours of the night and day. She's been accused of using sock puppets, and I don't believe that's what she's doing. I think some of the accounts might be sock puppets, but the vast majority, she's had a very effective run over the past year where any angry person who's got 47 followers and writes something nice about DeSantis or attacking one of his critics, she likes them, she follows them, she retweets them. And so, of course, they're super loyal to her, and they're not getting any other validation. Like when you click on their timelines, for those of you that are Twitter nerds like I am, you'll see that they're not getting any other interactions or engagement. Their tweets are mean replies over and over and over. Just, you know, they reply to something, it's some CNN person, and they're like, oh, fake news, CNN sucks. You know, this is all their tweets are angry things, but she replies to them and she retweets them and she likes their tweets. So they get this little engagement buzz from her. So if she posts anything critical of anyone, they all swarm. I've seen people just get absolutely harassed because she's misstated or exaggerated something, and it's insane. Like the governor has hired an online troll to be a spokesperson. And again, like it sounds like a petty thing to be whining about somebody being mean on Twitter, but it is part of an overall move from policy to culture war fights.
And the fact that she's paid a taxpayer salary is also, I think, something
to be an online bully. It's really kind of pathetic. And there's no plausible deniability at this point. There's been too many headlines and too many crazy things that have happened that the governor's senior staff and the governor himself have to know what she's doing, and they explicitly condone it at this point. Everything she does on Twitter from now on is absolutely his fault. But again, like he started out his time in the governor's office really well. There was a well thought out and financially sound pay raise for teachers. There were some reforms. I personally think that every elected official and government appointee should be worried all the time about losing their jobs. And he knocked some people off of some of these advisory boards and regulatory boards that people don't pay a lot of attention to, but have immense power in the state. He knocked the supervisor of elections in a South Florida county. He removed her from office for malfeasance, and she was corrupt and incompetent. That's a bad combo. She needed to be out.
As well as the sheriff of sheriff of, I think, Broward for
the Broward sheriff that had been so incompetent. I'm friends with somebody whose daughter was killed in the Parkland shooting. So this is a real thing. Like the government incompetence can cost lives. And that's a whole nother, the Parkland thing's a whole nother thing, but like the Broward sheriff was just wildly incompetent in a lot of ways. These people deserve to be removed from office, and it's a tough thing for the Democrats to remove their own. I can be sympathetic to that. So when DeSantis removed some the supervisor elections and that sheriff, there was a little bit of squeaking, but then they were kind of like, you know, everybody was chill with it. These were not defensible people, and you know, he was exerting his power in a more overt way than we'd seen a governor do in a very long time, but it was for good things and things that were justifiable and things that you could say that's for the benefit of the people of Florida. He's not kicking her out because she's a Democrat. He's kicking her out because she's completely incompetent. He's removing that sheriff because children died. Okay. And then you look at what we have now, you know, this whole war on Florida businesses. His messaging for the past year has been, my COVID policies are better because Florida stayed open and that saved our economy. And then he goes and does this. And it's weird because he needs the economy to be good to justify his reelection and to justify his run for president. And again, I think at this point, we can assume that the 2024 presidential run is a given. He is asking the people of the state of Florida to vote him in so he can abandon us 2 years into the term.
Even if Trump runs?
I think he would still challenge. I think he's got enough cojones that he would challenge Trump. And you look at how he's been distancing himself. He doesn't go kiss the ring down at Mar-a-Lago. He doesn't, when Trump is speaking in the state, he's not one of the people on stage shaking his hand and giving introductory speeches. He's not there. I think he's absolutely willing to. But the interesting thing about all of this, DeSantis can only pass his own congressional districts and take this vengeful, stupid action against Disney if the legislature goes along with it. Now, DeSantis doesn't need Disney's money. He doesn't need money from the Chamber of Commerce. But you know who does? All those Republican critters in the legislature. DeSantis has nationalized his campaign. He is the culture warrior. He's the one that is sticking it to the woke left. He is a Fox News darling. And he has a fundraising base that is truly nationwide. He gets piles of money online from all 50 states. He does not need Disney. He's fine. He needs to just, he just needs to be able to keep doing Fox News. He needs to be able to keep sending out emails saying that he's fighting the fight. But I'll tell you right now, can you name, as a non-Floridian, can you name any other member of the Florida legislature? Can you name anyone? Just any of them, anybody?
Do members of Congress count?
No, Florida legislature. Can you name any of them?
No.
Okay. I guarantee you that the vast majority of people in this state might be able to name one or two, but not very many. These people could light their hair on fire and they're not going to make news. They have no ability to do what DeSantis is doing. They can't nationalize their campaigns. They can't. And so I don't think that the Republicans are going to lose control of the legislature, but this is the kind of thing that could make a couple of them stumble, especially if this isn't repealed in enough time and it starts causing actual pain in Central Florida. You might see a couple of them get picked off. And he doesn't actually need the Republican legislators to get elected for him to run for president. He has to get elected. He's a loser if he doesn't. He can't run for president as a loser in this kind of Trumplican world. But if the Republican legislators lose, that's fine. And in a lot of ways, you can argue that it's better for him because then everything that he wants to do between 2022 and the presidential campaign gearing up in late 2023 and 2024, he can say, well, it's because of the Democrats and those squishy rhino Republicans. Everything that he doesn't get his way, he can blame on them. So it's probably in his interest if, the Republican legislators don't do as well. The whole thing is mind-boggling. I still can't believe that they just march along silently, like, oh, sure, that's fine. Let's be lemmings. And oh, there's a nice cliff. You think we should walk off the cliff? Okay.
Just an example of that. I'll just say an example of that in a second. But I guess this is a bit of a cope. But I'll just say that the last two times that a incumbent governor tried to or a former governor tried to nationalize a governor's race, that being Matt Bevin in Kentucky and Terry McAuliffe in Virginia, they lost to Andy Beshear and Glenn Youngkin, respectively, on local issues. So that's a cope because that's clearly not going to happen this time. But just an example.
I mean, it might. I mean, again, like cratering the Central Florida economy, Orange County and Osceola County have trended blue for the last couple of election cycles, but there's still an awful lot of people here. And you peel off 5-10% of the Republicans and you get a larger percentage of the independent vote and DeSantis loses. I think it's a massively uphill battle for the Democrats this year. All of the people that are running the Democratic primary have various challenges. But I mean, again, like a friend of mine who agrees with me on an awful lot of stuff, we were talking the other day and I was like, oh God, if it's Charlie Crist, I don't want to vote for Charlie Crist, but I'm not voting for DeSantis after he did this to my hometown. I don't know if you know enough about Louisiana politics, but there was a race when David Duke was running, the former KKK Grand Wizard. Yeah. And the guy that was running against him was literally a crook, very corrupt, lots of problems. And there were bumper stickers that were made that said, vote for the crook, it's important. Because it was better to have somebody that was the predictable sort of corrupt politician than to vote in somebody who was literally a white supremacist.
Yes, a similar story, by the way, happened a few years ago, like 2 decades ago in France, where you had the president Jacques Chirac, who was also corrupt, but his opponent was JeanMarie Le Pen, who was the father of and who's an actual Holocaust denier.
Yeah. So you got the same thing here, where it's like, Macron is not perfect by any means. No political critter is, but Marie Le Pen, there's so many photos of her like literally hugging Putin. My God, it's like it doesn't matter what your reservations are. Like you got somebody who's Russian sympathizer, Russian puppet. I think, after the election results were announced, I retweeted the news with the variation of Russian worship, go F yourself.
Yeah.
I did Google Translate, I put Russian puppet, go F yourself. But it's going to be, if Charlie Crist is the Democratic nominee, I'm going to maybe make a bumper sticker that says vote for the weasel. It's important because he was a weasel as governor, but I don't believe that he hates the people of the state of Florida. I think he is an ambitious, scheming politician like so many others. He made a lot of bad decisions as governor, a lot of shady crap, but it wasn't illegal and it wasn't violating the First Amendment. There was a petty, crappy thing he tried where Shands Hospital, which is the teaching hospital associated with the University of Florida, my alma mater, he tried to zero fund a program for indigent cancer patients at Shands that was financially well run, was helpful in training the next generation of oncologists. And did I mention it was poor people with cancer? He tried to zero fund it because the state rep from that district had supported Marco Rubio in the Senate primary in 2010 instead of Charlie Crist. The legislature came back and overrode his veto with a unanimous vote in both the House and the Senate. And trust me, the House and Senate don't agree on everything, much less all of the Democrats and all of the Republicans in both chambers agreeing on everything. Like that just doesn't happen very much. Charlie Crist is a weasel, period. But I will vote for him if it's him and DeSantis on the ballot. Absolutely. After this crap this week, vote for the weasel. I don't know. Yeah. Nikki Fried went to college with me and she did a great job with student government. And she's she's a moderate Democrat, which ticks off the progressives, but
it's funny because I guess some of my friends and I in my circle of friends have sort of been more exposed to sort of the online campaign of Nikki Fried, and some of us have found it a little bit cringeworthy at times.
The Nikki's challenge is that she's the underdog, and if you put out vanilla, Happy Veterans Day, you're what makes freedom possible. Thank you. God bless you. Like, okay, that's cool. You'll get a couple likes and everything. You can't get any attention at all if you don't stir the pot a bit. I'm not her comms director. I'm not her advisor. Again, like she was a year ahead of me in college and law school, and I get along with her and I respect her. I can respect the challenge of what she's trying to do. Charlie Crist has been involved in politics a lot longer than she has. This is her first elected office. It is what it is.
Yeah. If only Democrats had nominated Gwen Graham 4 years ago.
If the Democrats had nominated, well, I know her. I know one of her consultants. I would have voted for Gwen Graham over DeSantis that year. She was a moderate Democrat and not crazy. And DeSantis had run a campaign that was basically like, Trump likes me. Trump likes me. Trump likes me. Did I tell you Trump likes me? Trump likes me. That was all his messaging. That was it. He had no issues on his website, nothing.
And I don't know what Dems were
thinking. Queso's here.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
We have a queso cameo. Sorry.
Cool. Oh, hi,
hello.
Queso.
Okay.
I don't know what Dems were thinking by nominating an Our Revolution endorsed candidate in a state like Florida.
Well, the trouble was that some of the other candidates were running negative ads against each other, and they didn't think that Andrew Gillum was going to be a threat, and so they were all smacking at each other. And when you've got more than 2 people in a primary, then you can have something like that happen. And Andrew Gillum got enough to get the nomination. And it was a bad, bad, bad thing for the Democrats, and has turned now into a bad, bad thing for the entire state. So, you know.
Yeah.
Andrew Gillum was a mess. I lived in Tallahassee at the time. He was incompetent and corrupt, which again is a bad combo. That's not what anybody wants. So,
yeah,
you know.
There was a third candidate in the Florida governor's race who, doesn't get talked about a lot, but I think people are actually saying some nice things about her, and that she actually might be able to make a very credible challenge to DeSantis, specifically because she's Cuban American.
Annette DeTeo?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, okay, so does not have the name recognition. The Democratic power structure and money is going to go to Charlie Crist. Nikki will get younger votes and some of the more moderate votes. There's not a lane for her. That's the problem. There's just not a lane.
Yeah.
She's more of the Democrat old school, like Charlie Crist, but she's not going to peel away support from him.
Right, because I remember she was actually because she was citing her, her Cuban American heritage, and actually talking about DeSantis' attacks on Disney as "quote unquote" I think Fidel-like. This is the term I think she used.
There's been a couple of people that have made that analogy. I'm trying to be fair in my language, because no one's being rounded up and put in camps. No one's actually being shot. No one's being disappeared in the middle of the night. And this isn't tyranny, this isn't Hitler, but we need a word that's like tyranny light, tyranny adjacent.
Urbanism?
Yeah, or urbanism. I think there's been, I know Bill Kristol said a couple things along those lines. It's a aspirationally fascist.
Yeah.
Again, we're not there. I think the people that called Trump Hitler made a rhetorical error and a messaging error, because it's too far. But again, these are shades of gray, where you have a powerful government official saying that the state is going to do this incredibly impactful, devastating thing if you criticize us. Like keep in mind, Disney didn't try to interfere with the operations of the state. They didn't say that government law enforcement can't operate within their boundaries. They didn't say they're not going to comply with state law. They said they're not giving any more political contributions, and they said publicly they don't like a law those political people passed. Mm-hmm. And this is what happens. I mean, it's not what you expect a Democratic, and I mean that in the small d Democratic kind of way. It's not what you expect a small d Democratic government to do.
Yeah, and perhaps there is a case to be made that maybe companies as big as they are shouldn't get these special breaks. But
pause. I'm going to fight everyone who calls it a special break. It is not a tax break. It is a different government structure. It streamlines things for them, but there's it's also a complicated thing. It is not a break. It is a different structure with good and bad. The thing is, I would argue that it is less cronyism, because again, Orange and Osceola County don't want to run that thing. So it's, when you say crony capitalism, you usually, it more applies to the context where some billionaire professional sports team owner wants a stadium, and then they get this massive tax break, or they get some kind of multi-million-dollar grant, or somehow the government decides to do eminent domain on the exact parcel that they need, and then it gets sold to them for less than the actual market value you'd expect. Right. That is all crony capitalism, and that's crap, and people should loudly criticize it. What's going on with Disney is again, they have control over things, but they're also having to run it and operate it and deal with all the attendant headaches. There's been people that have brought up the fact that this is unfair to Universal. Universal showed up 3 decades later. They didn't build Orlando. Disney built Orlando. My family's been here since my mom and dad were kids. 5 generations of my family have lived here in the state, from my great grandparents down to my nieces and nephews. And Disney built the state. Universal has a much smaller parcel that is directly off I-4 within the city limits of Orlando. They did not need an entire infrastructure built for them. It is much more comparable to the situation with Disneyland in California. And here's the other bit for the people that are trying to use Universal as some sort of example. You know what happens if this goes through and every Orange County taxpayer has a tax hike? guess what? Universal Studios is an Orange County taxpayer. So if you're trying to do this because you think it's unfair to Universal, do you think that a $200,000 increase on their property taxes might be a little unfair to them? How many people can they hire for? I think I got to go back and look. There's an Orlando Business Journal article. I think it was like they would just the bond issue alone. And remember, we talked about all the other things that it's going to cause. It's going to be expensive for the county. Just the bond issue alone, I think, is going to raise Universal's property taxes. I think they estimated like $235,000. I could be wrong on that figure, but it was roughly $200,000. That that's something.
Yeah, I would let you keep talking. It's just that we're running out of time, and I just wanted to talk about redistricting in the Senate race. But I guess my overall point was that, whatever the merits of the status is, or as you were describing it, the reason why they were getting rid of it was overtly political.
Absolutely.
And was one of the things that we talked about it was the fact that the legislature is sort of going along with DeSantis. One of the ways they're doing that is redistricting. Do you know enough about that to be able to talk about what's going on with redistricting?
I wrote about it last night. So here's what happened. The Florida Constitution says that the Florida legislature is supposed to draw the district lines. And we're talking about the congressional districts. And this is how it works in every state, that the state legislatures draw the lines for the federal congressional districts. We just had the 2020 census. And what happens with that is they count up all the people in the country. And if states have grown or shrunk in population, then sometimes the number of congressional representatives gets adjusted. New York lost one and Florida gained one. So no matter what, Florida didn't conquer any new territories. So if you have to fit a whole extra congressional representative within our borders, that means you have to move the lines. As much as we'd joke about annexing Georgia, we could kick the butt, I'm sure. Anyway, I'm
a future Georgia resident, so I might take
okay, I'm kidding. There've been some funny little border fights and water fights, but that's a whole separate story. Anyway, you have to change the lines. And the Florida Constitution says that the Florida legislature is supposed to draw the lines. But again, this is done in the way, there's Queso in the background. He's another cameo. This is done like any other bill where the legislature writes it and they argue about it in committee and they argue about it in the House and the Senate, and they're supposed to figure out a way to figure out their maps and send it to the governor, and then he can sign it or veto it. And he vetoed it. And then he said he was going to send over his own maps, and the legislature said, okay, fine. And they just took his maps. They technically can do that, but it's complicated, and there's already been a lawsuit about it. But here's where it got tricky. So you assume that the political critters are all going to draw maps in ways that, are good for their fellow critters on their same team. And the map that the legislature had drawn was definitely a little bit more Republican friendly. The DeSantis one was just like, hold my beer, let's do this. I mean, it went nuts. Like, it went from like a slight Republican majority to oh God, what is it like? Almost like expected that about 2/3 of the districts would be Republican. Al Lawson's district, who is the Black member of Congress who represents the Tallahassee area, took his district and chopped it up in little tiny bits and distributed it out. Now, there are cases and a Florida constitutional amendment from a few years ago that govern all this stuff. But for a long time, there's been these majority minority districts that are specifically designed to increase minority representation in Congress. And Al Lawson was in one of them. And so it's a double-edged sword because they're heavily Democratic districts. So the Democrats like them because they get somebody elected, but then it makes the other areas more correspondingly Republican. So you get this super heavy Democratic district, but it means that, the adjacent districts are more likely to be won by Republicans. And in my opinion, I think that the Democrats need to stop trying to defend these things because they are questionable constitutionally. And they also end up getting a lot of people that they don't have to fight for re-election once they win. So the only way they get out is when they die, retire, or go to jail.
Or face a primary challenger.
They don't lose in primaries very often. Because there's less attention paid to the primaries, and it just ends up where you end up with a lot of backbenchers, and you end up with people that end up getting derailed. Corrine Brown, who had one of the gerrymander districts from the Jacksonville area, went to jail for a bit, just flat out financial corruption stuff. Anyway, Governor DeSantis's map just wiped out Al Lawson's district. I don't think there's anywhere, I'd have to go back and look at it again, but I don't think that there's any way that you would expect a Democrat. It'd be very tough. He's already talking about trying to, run in the district that he's in, and he does have good name recognition. He's been around the area, and who knows what the backlash from all this will be. The map also heavily dilutes Val Deming's district in Central Florida. She is the Black former police chief who was running for Senate against Marco Rubio. So again, she's not running for the seat, but it's one anyway, the Democrats didn't like it. But the Republicans just were rubber stamping everything DeSantis sent over in the special session. The Democrats had a sit down protest. They literally sat on the floor and chanted for a little bit. They delayed things for about an hour, and then they went and voted. And then that was the end of that. Randy Fine, who is the House sponsor of the Disney bill, went on the local television show and said that the protest was worse than what happened in Washington on January 6th. And so, yeah, it's insane. And so I collected some photos online and reached out to Representative Carlos Smith and asked her some photos and things. And so I basically laid it all out. And it's here's a picture of Representative Angie Nixon holding up a sign. She is not bludgeoning a police officer with a fire extinguisher. Here's Representative McCurdy sitting on the floor. He's not breaking any windows. Here's Anna Eskamani looking at her cell phone. She would leave the Capitol without stealing any podiums. The whole thing was just absurd. And then he actually had the audacity to say that their protest had disenfranchised 21 million Floridians because it had deprived, had taken away the chance to debate the Disney bill. And that's just crap. You're worried now about debating the Disney bill in the last hour of your little special sessions shenanigans. If you actually cared about looking into this issue, you would have freaking called somebody at Reedy Creek, you moron. You would have, I don't know, delayed this stupid thing until next full session when it could actually be studied and looked into. The whole thing has just been absurd. We've got these districts now that are totally politically motivated and even if you don't like the people running, you got to sympathize. How do you even start fundraising and planning a campaign when you don't even know what your district universe is? I've worked on congressional and legislative campaigns, and you budget for different things depending on, what TV markets are you going to have to be in. TV is really expensive in Florida, and you've got multiple, depending on your district, you might have 2 or 3 markets that you've got to get into and pay for. How much mail are you going to have to send, what kind of events you're going to have to do, and you want to do things in the district, not outside of the district. How do you even plan your schedule when you don't know where the line's going to be? And DeSantis's map was so radically different from what the legislature did before that it really has upended a lot of plans. We've got, the primaries in August. This is insane. This is not a good way to govern. They're doing things very, very poorly.
And Al Austin's district in particular is actually, if you follow people on election Twitter, it's one of the most litigated districts. People are fans of it. People hate it. I actually drew a version of the district that's entirely within Jacksonville and ends up being Biden +8 instead of Biden +20 or something.
Yeah. Well, no, that's not Lawson's district. That was Corrine Brown's old district.
Right.
Because I worked on one of the suicide run Republican races against her. And that district has changed a lot over the time. When I was working in it, it looked like a squished salamander that stretched from Jacksonville to north areas of Orlando. It had at one point the district narrows down to basically be a highway wide. That's how stretched out and weird it was. It really was a salamander looking gerrymander.
Yeah. And anyway, I know we're almost running out of time. I just want to mention one more thing. That's the Senate race, because I think most of us assume it's going to be Marco Rubio versus Val Demings. I think people have actually liked, of the Democrats who are running, they like Val Demings the best because, of her background and sort of the message she's giving. She seems to have running a better campaign in some ways than I think the Democrats who are running for governor. I don't know if that's how you see it, though.
Yeah, she's definitely got a good, strong message, and she also has the benefit where she's the clear favorite. I honestly just haven't been paying attention because I don't even remember the last time I checked it who was running in the primary against her, because it wasn't anybody that I thought can be a real contender, and I don't know if they're actually fundraising or anything. I haven't been paying attention because it's not worth. I've only got so much bandwidth. But Demings was a police chief here. Her husband was a police chief here. He's currently the mayor of Orange County. And he's done a solid job. Again, I don't agree with him on everything, but like there hasn't been stuff where I've been like, oh my gosh, that's terrible, that's corrupt, that's awful. Like it's, stuff's functioned, it's chugged along. And in Congress, Demings has been outspoken on some things, but she's not a lunatic. She's not a firebrand. And
she's an ex-cop.
Yeah, she's an ex-cop. She's intelligent. She's got some policies that she cares very clearly, deeply about. When you've got somebody who's a member of Congress trying to run to get promoted to the Senate, there's so many of them in Congress that they sometimes have trouble getting through and getting attention. But because Florida is just so much attention here, and because she's got things that she's really advocated for, she's gotten notice. She's got a generally positive approval rating. My little friend is back. When he was a kitten, his tail got broken. I got him from the shelter in Austin, and so it never completely grew as long as it should be. So he has a kitten-sized tail, even though he's grown up. But anyway, just one of his cute little quirks. Glad he's helping this discussion. Sure. Thanks, buddy. Anyway, she's well liked, and she's not done anything to embarrass herself. And she's done a couple things to make people okay, well, she's being a good representative. She's engaged in the issues. So that's, if you're running for Senate, hers is the kind of resume that you'd want, with all the issues of the Democrats. I mean, defund the police was a catastrophically suicidal slogan for any Democrat that wants to be elected anywhere other than small sections of Portland.
Yeah, and when Democrats in Portland say that, Democrats everywhere else get asked that question.
Yeah, and I mean the fact that the national level Democrats were slow to distance themselves from that. And the
Biden
thing is,
wasn't though. He was quick though, relatively speaking.
I mean, not that quick. Months went by. You can't throw defund the police at Val Demings. She's never supported any kind of rhetoric like that. She's a former police chief, married to a former police chief who is the mayor of Orange County and is running that county in a way that is not defund the police. Now, again, and Val Demings also has the advantage that she's not a radical progressive. I don't know if you saw the news. I know media, I covered it. Joe Manchin in West Virginia has a very high approval rating. I think one of the highest in Congress, maybe one of the highest historically.
I think he's tied with Bernie Sanders, and he has a three-way tie for the most approved senator now.
Yeah, so basically he just won prom queen. And so the online far left progressive gnashing that he and Kristen Sinema are the devil, the voters of West Virginia like him. And Liz Smith, who had done comms for Pete Buttigieg, pointed out online today, for progressives that don't like a West Virginia Democrat, just wait until you see a West Virginia Republican. So, maybe count your blessings. And Val Demings is, in a lot of ways, you could kind of, there's some parallels with Central Florida, that it does lean blue, but we're not San Francisco here. And she's not a San Francisco liberal. So an effort to try to paint her as a radical, you can't paint her as a hippie. You can't paint her as some lunatic. You can't paint her as an unhinged, person who's willing to defund the police and all these other radical things that, whatever Tucker Carlson is mad about tonight, is just really hard to pin on Val Demings. And that's going to be one of the biggest challenges for Marco Rubio's campaign. He's the incumbent, but he's viewed as insufficiently loyal to Trump, so that the fervor and the fire is not there on the Republican side as much for him. And Val Demings is not scary. So it's not a situation of people voting for Trump because they hated Hillary Clinton. People might dislike or disagree with Val Demings, but I think it'd be really hard to find somebody that was fired up about hating Val Demings. Like, I think it would be tough.
Yeah. And by the way, Sarah, I just want to say, first of all, I really appreciate you staying like this long. We know we've gone a little bit over, and I could see it get dark in your window over the course of this interview.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I will say, I don't blame you for sort of checking out of the whole Senate race thing, because the blog I'm following actually has both the Senate and governor's races likely are at the moment. So, because I think of the whole national trend and the fact that Florida has shifted right in recent years.
It's a rough year. It's a rough year electorally for Democrats. And again, like, they're not hiring me as a consultant, and they don't need to, but Joe Manchin and Val Demings are electable.
Yeah.
And that's what needs to be studied. They're, you know, an Amy Klobuchar type of Democrat that doesn't scare people and isn't saying things that stress people out. Between the inflation and the war in Ukraine and the withdrawal from Afghanistan, people are on edge and freaked out, and the Democrats need to be not scary.
For sure. Anyway, I want to give you a chance to plug in like places where people can follow you and et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, well, Mediaite, first of all, is my main gig. I'm the contributing editor there. It's media, mediaite.com. I am also pretty vocal on my Twitter account. And so my last name is Rumpf, R-U-M as in Mary, P as in Paul, F as in Frank. And the Twitter handle is Rumpf Shaker. Make sure that F is there. If you are familiar with the glory that is 1990s rap, there was a song by a group called Rex and Effects called, you know, Rumpf Shaker, which is just missing the F, and then that's my name. Yeah, so that was an immediate nickname, and it became a Twitter handle because why not? It's funny. Anyway, so that's like the main things. I've got a number of other articles that are going to be coming out in some other places, but mostly Mediaite is where I've been for the past 2 years. So.
For sure. And Sarah, thank you so much for joining me for tonight's discussion.
All right, thanks a lot.